We had finally made it to Turkmenistan. Looking at the map, we saw there was a beach nearby and thought we'd go for a dip to celebrate finally making it. We drove through the arid landscape, following the oil and gas pipelines, and eventually ended up at the designated tourist section of the country. We asked around and were eventually let onto a special beach area just for tourists.
We're opening a road to a beach for us, apparently.
So we're here in Turkmenistan. My friend Misha is helping me break into my own car because the boys are at the beach with the key. He's got a much nicer car and went to a lovely resort called the Yacht Club. After the initial hiccup, we continued on towards the capital, Ashgabat, although it didn't take long for one of the teams to have another issue. So it's question time with Adam and Matt. Adam and Matt, what's going on?
Basically, right, so Julian and the Spanish guys go into a petrol station. It's not a joke. The guy tries to sneak in behind them, and he's just fucking sitting there or something. Can I swear on this?
Yeah.
Shit. So he's just sitting there. So they reversed and bumped into him pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Like, it's right on where the door jamb meets the bodywork, so he can't actually open his passenger door. But it's like you can bend it and shape it, it'll be fine again.
Like we said, it's the passenger door. So
it's the passenger door,
and he's pushing in.
And he's pushing in. And he's asking for $200 to pay him off. So I was suggesting let's just fill up and leave. Because the police turned up and then they left free, probably didn't seem interested at all. But yeah, basically, first real stop in Turkmenistan.
Eventful.
We continued on to the next town and got our first true taste of Turkmen hospitality, although most of the kids did think our names were hilarious for some reason.
Have a nice trip.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice trip. Salam. Hey. Look at this guy go.
We had driven until it got too dark to drive and had set up camp somewhere in the desert with the other teams. We then packed up and set off again for the capital, only a few hours away. We followed the only roads available, and the state that some of the industrial trucks we saw went in made us worry about the state that our cars would be in by the end.
So we are in the middle of Turkmenistan, somewhere, about 2 hours away from Ashgabat. Yeah, stopped at this little shop, got some flatbreads, all this crap for $5. This is my favourite snack of the trip so far. These are absolutely delicious. They're actually really good.
So we've been playing bumper cars with the cars a lot, and allegedly we just bumped Woody's team behind us into a Turkmenistan car. And they weren't overly happy, but they seemed to be fine to just drive away. Thoughts, guys?
Maybe people should use their brakes more.
That's what happens if you play bumper cars with cars. I'm not overly surprised, really.
So we're in Ashgabat, waiting for a Spanish team who have broken down on a stupidly bumpy road. We pulled into this car park and all these kids and people are around signing our cars and stuff, and just having a great time meeting some people.
We eventually found a hotel and got some rest. The day ahead was going to be a big one. The day was spent driving around Ashgabat and taking in the incredible and amazing sights. The leader, Turkmen, had designed the city in such a way as to be imposing and impressive, and it really was. The strict laws there meant you're not allowed to film or photograph public buildings, so apologies that all these shots are from within the car. Some things to note from that breakneck tour. All buildings in the capital have to be white marble, and as a result most cars are too. This is a book written by the leader telling the people how to live their lives, and this is a statue commemorating it. Pictures of the leader are everywhere in the city. The people are actually incredibly friendly and couldn't be kinder. This is a statue on a 200-foot high pedestal made out of gold of the leader that rotates to face the sun.
We're at the Arch of Neutrality in Turkmenistan with the giant statue that rotates to face the sun. It's very cool. And yeah, Turkmenistan, awesome place. Love it.
Thoughts on what we've seen and experienced so far?
It's like a mixture of Disneyland and what I imagine North Korea would be like. But the people have been really, really friendly. It's just like weirdly huge buildings and lots of white marble and loads of fountains and loads of people gardening. Everything's sort of immaculate, and it's kind of like Disneyland in the sort of fake. Everything's white and gold, but I find it weirdly nice.
We set out to enjoy the park, but quickly realised we were the only people there. It was completely deserted apart from the staff, and I mean really deserted. So we're currently in the only restaurant, also being we are the only customers in the only restaurant at the park of the Arc of Neutrality in Ashgabat in Turkmenistan, all for the glorious leader Turkmen. And Alex had an amazing thought.
Well, if you look outside the window, which you might not be able to see, it's just a barren red wasteland. And we're in this glorious green terraformed area, and this could literally be Mars right now, with like a big bubble over our head, and it's a barren wasteland. Very weird. I concur.
So, to Mars.
Let's do it. To Mars. Glad we made it, boys. Biggest indoor Ferris wheel in the world. In the world.
So I'm thinking, whilst we're trapped in Turkmen's elevator to nowhere, we can do some interviews.
Sure.
Adam, favourite part of Turkmenistan so far?
Probably the people, because they've all been really friendly and really welcoming and, you know, honking and really pleased to see us. Everyone seems genuinely pleased to see us.
Alex?
I'd have to go with people again, and also how much it feels like being on Mars, which is just mind-blowing.
Also people and the border crossing went quite well. It was very welcome. After taking in the sights, we weren't able to find the rest of the teams, and communication was nearly impossible in the city. We had to head out to the door to hell on our own. As you can expect, things went wrong very quickly.
Max, what's just happened?
So we're about 15 miles from the door to hell in Turkmenistan, and the roads got ridiculous. We're driving about 70, we dodged one pothole, couldn't miss another, and it's bent the tyre in 2 places.
Let's go and have a look.
Yeah, go have a look at that.
So, this is the damage.
Decent bend there. It's a little one there, but it seems like it's only the lip. Like,
is it?
If you look under here, like this rim is like basically still straight. So we might be able to ham it back in.
Has it lost air? Like,
I don't know.
It doesn't.
It looks.
seem.
It's a bit
it
down,
looks,
but we've never actually pumped up anyway.
So
Since we've left, so it might have been down at. I don't know.
We switched Maggie to her off-road tyres and gave the rest of her a bit of TLC. We then pressed on, heading towards the door to hell. The off-road sand dunes proved incredibly difficult, and we spent about 2 hours digging her out, moving 5 meters at a time. Eventually, we had to pay some locals to help tow her out of a ditch with their jeep. It was a struggle, but eventually the door to hell was looming on the horizon, and we couldn't wait to get up close.
What the shit?
We were then joined by the other teams, who had denied all local help and got there using only their determination and a ton of vodka.
If this was anywhere else in the world, the ratings would have us 50 feet back.
Once we'd calmed down from everything a little, we then got the drone out to get some insane aerial footage. For scale, the small white dots around the crater are people. Whilst we were trying to be the first drone ever flown across the door to hell, the Welsh boys from Team Yakida were busy trying to be the first to hit a golf ball clear across the pit. We made sure to get some daytime footage the next morning as well, to give a true scale of how grand the door to hell was. The next morning, we needed to get back to the road from the door to hell, and although we had daylight on our side, this proved extremely difficult. The morning was spent digging Maggie out of sand pits, taking huge run-ups to get over the dunes, being dehydrated, and for some, having heat stroke. It was a true test of our crap cars, and was a very intense morning all round. Alex was driving, and Adam was hanging out the window on rock spotting duty, which he clearly loved. We're here, in the middle of the Turkmenistan desert, and unfortunately, Adam has aged about 40 years.
I have done.
He's got
feel old.
white hair.
White eyebrows.
Here we go, big round. You got this!
thoughts for the camera?
I love sand.
We finally made it to the main road, and whilst one team set off to find an abandoned train yard on the horizon, hoping to get us some water, the rest of us attended to our cars, took in the local wildlife, and messed about with slow motion features and rotten fruit. After a while, we also set out to try and find some water, based on a location pointed out on our very, very old map. Our map said there'd be a big crater filled with water here, and we've been short of water for quite a while now. It's literally a pit full of mud and fire. Luckily, the others had been more successful, and we stopped for a quick meal and then headed on to the Uzbekistan border.
So we just left the daughter house, got on the main road for about 10 kilometres and found this little shop, thought we'd get some food or whatever, and ended up being this really cool restaurant. We're just sitting on the floor having some something in the pea.
Oh, this looks amazing.
The border to Uzbekistan was closed, so we were looking around the local city for a hotel. 3 different people offered to take us to a hotel. The one who also offered us tea, fish and drink won us over, and another guy has now given him a lift to tell us where to go to this very, very cheap hotel.
They're now teaming up.
They're teaming up to show us where to stay. Oh, here we go. Let's have a look. He's very intense with his hosting.
Very intense.
I'm incredibly confused.
We just spent about 15 minutes haggling over nothing.
We spent about 15 minutes with her not accepting our money and then accepting $14 less than she should have done.
It's been a long day. Quickly, how are we feeling? What are you excited about?
I'm drained, but I'm super psyched to go get smashed with this random Turkmen guy. Fish and beer and daughters.
Feeling pretty good. The hotel woman really fancied me, and I was like, what about Alex? She was like, no. I was like, what about Max? She was like, no. I was like, what about me? She was like, so I feel pretty good.
Yeah, Adam's, whole existence is centered around being better than us, so.
I'm also excited, and the fish and the beer and Adam's new wife await. Update, we are on the way to our romantic playdate / invitation. What would you call this? Just
like
the most
day.
Yeah, a literal spur of the moment homestay from the nicest man ever. We 3 kings bring gifts: a watermelon, national fruit of Turkmenistan,
Like a playing cards.
pack of playing cards
From Georgia.
because we don't know where the night's taking us, and
American cigarettes.
we did find our man and shared his bread, fish and beer, although he made a point to call Alex a baby and a woman when he wasn't drinking enough.
Oh, come on.
Oh, alright. Alex is making the English embarrassed by just saying crap at drinking.
Pete.
With me. There you go. My fault. Okay.
Что зовут рыба?
Это рыба называется шамайка.
Шмайка.
Шмайка, да.
Сколько лет вы живете здесь?
30 лет здесь.
30 здесь.
30 лет.
Ты любишь? Да, я понимаю.
30 лет здесь живу я.
Я понимаю.
Да. Потом я колхоза жил. Колхоз, село, колхоз. Да, я жил потом.
Бил. Окей. 30 лет назад.
Да, армия. Я армия служил. Близкий Эстония.
Ты был армия?
Армия. Военно-морской флот я служил.
Okay. He used to live there when he was in the army.
Well,
Да.
This city that way. I didn't get the name.
Karta jest, karta Barentsovo moре есть, Barentsovo moре, Finlandia там близкий.
He told us about his time in the army and how he now enjoyed living in Turkmenistan afterwards. A friend of his came and sat with us, and we continued to talk with them, learning all about the culture and the history of the place they lived. Eventually, he told us we had to leave because of the police curfew and organised for his son to drive us home in a van. He was incredibly kind and incredibly gracious and couldn't have been a better host.
Большое спасибо за что сюда пришли, поздоровался. Спасибо. Еще раз проходите сюда.
Спасибо. Currently on a nighttime tour with our friend, and we're having a great time. Right, lads?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Our driver took the scenic route back to the hotel, showing off all the buildings of the city. Like his father, he was incredibly proud to be Turkmen and incredibly proud of his city, and just wanted us to enjoy it.
Basically, awesome day. Woke up at the Derweze, ended up sleeping in Ashgabat, had smoked fish and beer with some locals, and now we're off to a hilarious hotel. After our private tour of the city with this lovely guy here. He's a taxi driver, works with blind and deaf people, and sometimes works in the textile industry. And all in all, really, really interesting, and like very, very good chats with people actually. Yeah, and very good beer. And whoa! Sorry, that was someone whatever. Piva and Riba, which is beer and fish. That's all you need.
The next morning, we prepared to journey to Uzbekistan. As fuel is incredibly cheap in Turkmenistan, requiring only £5 to fill up our entire tank, we decided to siphon it out of our fuel tank into the jerry cans so we could then go and fill up some more. As always, the locals were more than willing to help and couldn't have been kinder. As part of the inspection on the border, we had to drive the car over a pit so they could get under and check we weren't smuggling anything on the underside of the car. This was a good excuse to give Maggie's underside a nice once over and check everything's where it should be.
So we're currently in no man's land, driving along, stateless, looking for Uzbekistan. Look at the wire, look at that, strong wire. And there's an outpost with guards and stuff in it.
I think that's Uzbekistan.
And we should probably stop filming now. Speed ahead, number 4.
That is not an eyeball.
That is an eyeball. Max is getting some tips on how to access the black market petrol from this local. And we're just going to jam it. And I think he's just seen me filming him, so I'm going to stop.